Here to talk about techno-fascism, it's Leia French.
I have very good friends. Okay. All right. In 2025, democracy is an illusion. As far-right extremism surges across the world, as racism and white nationalism gather momentum, as violence escalates against queer people and immigrant communities, as genocide rages, as powerful tech billionaires merge with far-right bullies like Trump and Netanyahu to entrench authoritarianism, reshape our worlds, and decimate our hard-fought-for human rights, the question becomes, where are we in all of this? Where do we, as creators, stand? And what does this have to do with video games? As cultural artifacts, video games are primed to immerse and persuade. Wittingly or unwittingly, they mirror the dominant order of our time. In Resident Evil 5, African people are inhuman zombies. In Civilization, Western nations are framed as superior. Rape play cashes in on the othering and objectification of women. But if video games can entice consent to the dominant order, they can also inspire resistance to it. I'm hoping today to address the question, how? But first, let's take a look at how we got here. This is how we are bending the knee to techno-fascism. It began decades ago with neoliberalism, or as Giroux defines it, the belief that political, social, and economic power should reside in markets and corporations rather than in the hands of governments and citizens. It has led to mass privatization, deregulation, employment precarity, and the erosion of public services such as education and healthcare, deepening the divide between rich and poor as poverty and inequality escalate. It thrives on consumerism, hypercompetitiveness, and individualism, pitting us against each other. Their narrative, that anybody can succeed if they work hard enough, that the disadvantaged and the suffering are the authors of their own distress, regardless of systemic forces like race, class, or gender that produce inequality. It's profit over all. Out of this environment, we got a little something called surveillance capitalism, or as Simon and Whitson put it, the systematic monitoring of people or groups in order to regulate or govern their behavior. Tech giants, Google, Apple, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Palantir, household names from the US to South Africa, pillage personal data from our clicks, messages, and purchases. Then they profile, predict, and bombard us with targeted ads, manipulating not only our buying choices for profit, but our beliefs and our behavior. Can we ever forget how Cambridge Analytica plugged into Facebook's system to steal the data of up to 87 million Facebook users, their fears, their biases, mapped, targeted, exploited, all to predict and influence choices at the ballot box in favor of one Donald Trump, helping him win that election? And now we are here. The failure of neoliberalism, rising inequality, poverty, exclusion, and surveillance capitalism paved the way for something even darker, our emerging reality of techno-fascism. Techno-fascism is driven by a power block of autocrats like Trump, Putin, and Netanyahu, who align with tech billionaires such as Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, and Thiel to dismantle democracy, consolidate power, and generate wealth for an elite few. Techno-fascism operates hand-in-hand with surveillance capitalism, exploiting personal and social data to manipulate discourse, influence elections, and suppress dissent. Techno-fascists engineer what we see, what we buy, what we know, how we behave, how we fight, and how we vote. Techno-fascism's effects on society are tangible and wide-reaching. The militarization of technology. Digital infrastructures, data systems, and emerging technologies are built or repurposed for military, security, and coercive state functions, rather than democratic or civilian interests. It's the big tech surveillance systems that silence dissent, target activists, and spread misinformation. It's the drones, predictive policing, and biometric border controls that are deployed to police protests. Palantir's AI supports ICE in tracking, hunting, and deporting immigrants. Unmoderated platforms in Sudan fuel propaganda, hate speech, and violent mobilization. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, HP, IBM, and Palantir all supply Israel with AI-driven systems that are used in the genocide in Palestine, turning Gaza and the West Bank into testing grounds for exportable military technology. This is what UN expert Francesca Albanese calls an economy of genocide. Big tech meddling in state power. We saw what happens when big tech leverages state power. Elon Musk has never been an elected official, but Trump gave him Doge. Through Doge, Musk gained access to government data, gutted agencies, defunded programs, and fired thousands. Through Doge, USAID's annual budget for global health, disaster relief, water, and development was cut by 83%, endangering the lives of millions and condemning thousands in South Africa to preventable deaths. Musk claims that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, which makes cruelty the currency of power. As public services collapse, big tech moves in, with algorithms deciding loans, school placements, and healthcare. Disturbingly, they reinforce discrimination against marginalized racial and immigrant communities. As Cathy O'Neill notes, if a poor student can't get a loan because a lending model deems him too risky, he's then cut off from the kind of education that could pull him out of poverty. In South Africa, Google and Meta stepped in to fight supposed misinformation around our last elections. They are now both under investigation by our information regulator because they refuse to disclose documents about how they assess risk and manage misinformation around our 2024 general election. The erosion of education. In the words of Giroux, authoritarian movements have always understood that education is never neutral. It either serves freedom or power. In South Africa, universities risk losing millions in research funding for supporting Palestinian solidarity. The Trump administration is demanding censorship of university programs on Africa and the Middle East, dismantling DEI programs, whitewashing history, filling the curriculum with far-right propaganda, and punishing student activism. Education is being transformed into the site of indoctrination rather than a space for critical thinking. As Giroux warns, the struggle to reclaim education as a democratic force will therefore determine not only the future of the university, but the future of democracy itself. Social media. Social media has engendered a culture of lies, cruelty, and hate, lowering our attention span, stripping our capacity to think and arrive at sound judgments. Techno-fascists wield not only the wealth and power to fuel genocide, fund wars, and target the vulnerable, but also the social media platforms to normalize and legitimize that violence. So while rage-basing influences prey on our insecurities to breed hate and manipulate public opinion, grotesque acts and mass starvation become acceptable. Here, xenophobia soars as hashtag Operation Dedula leeches from Twitter into healthcare blockades against immigrants. The Competition Commission's inquiry affirms that tech giants like Google, Meta, and X have undermined South African journalism, weakening the credibility of local news while contributing to job losses and misinformation. Of course, Elon Musk threatened to buy Twitter. Oh, no, he bought out Twitter and threatened to buy Hasbro so he could rescue D&D for daring to offer representation beyond the established norm. Because it's that important to techno-fascists that they have control over cultural and imaginative spaces. So what now? To quote Giroux, the ghost of fascism has not merely returned, it has taken up residence and been made ordinary. The central question becomes, if we recognize this, how do we resist it? For my master's in game design, I developed a framework of design elements for transformative games. Games that, hopefully, can inspire players to critically reflect, resist the dominant order, and stand up for a more just and humane world, both in-game and in reality. This framework of elements was tested in a purposefully designed game, and the results suggest potential. First, we have the restoration story. Monbiot argues that political power is shaped less by leaders than by the stories they tell. In the most powerful stories, whether it's The Lord of the Rings or Narnia, whether it's leaders normalizing fascism or upholding democracy, we see the same narrative structure. Monbiot calls this the restoration story, and it goes like this. Disorder afflicts the land caused by powerful and nefarious forces working against the interests of humanity. The hero, who might be one person or a group of people, revolts against this disorder, fights the nefarious forces, overcomes them despite great odds, and restores order. This structure is also what makes Jet Set Radio Future so compelling. Through Graffiti, a group of skaters battle a megacorporation that is enforcing the city's oppressive rule. Or The Legend of Zelda. Game after game, the hero restores order to a land consumed by darkness, and game after game, we play it. Monbiot argues that dominant narratives like neoliberalism and techno-fascism prevail because we don't have a clear story to replace it. That when we develop the right story and learn how to tell it, it can infect the minds of people across the political spectrum. For example, New York City just elected an immigrant born in Uganda, Zoran Mamdani. He stands against capitalism, against racism, against anti-Semitism, against genocide. To quote Owen Jones, in this age of fascism, of darkness, of insecurity, hatred, and despair, New York has lit the torch of hope. The hope that Zoran Mamdani inspires might well represent a new restoration story. So how do we convey restoration stories in our games that can inspire such hope? Fictionalizing. Many persuasive games assume belief is best shaped through direct, fact-driven delivery. They privilege information over emotion, statistics over character. We try to evoke empathy, yet often render people as static placeholders viewed from a safe distance. Instead, messages can be delivered through fiction, fantasy, or metaphor, allowing players to explore real-world issues in a safe space. Neocab, for example, tells the story of the last human cab driver. It's fictional, but its themes of emotional survival amid automation and gig work echo straight into reality. Papers, Please explores authoritarianism and state surveillance almost entirely through its gameplay. No lectures needed. Wide appeal. Techno-fascism relies on manipulation, pitting us against each other to erode collective resistance. Transformative games can help us bridge these differences by evoking a sense of belonging and shared purpose. By creating spaces for connection and collaboration, players can transcend identity lines to resist together, evoking the sense of togetherness and belonging that humans, irrespective of political alignment, usually seek out. Multiplayer games like Journey, for example, encourage empathy, cooperation, and mutual support through shared challenges. Simple presentation. A transformative game should be understandable and cohesive, with every element reinforcing the game's message: mechanics, goals, conflicts, settings, and narrative. This keeps the game's core message in focus while also making it easy to follow. The simplicity of Papers, Please sharpens its message and saturates it with meaning. In Gris, gameplay, visuals, music, and level design work together to evoke grief, hope, and catharsis. As techno-fascism erodes education and expression, this simplicity lets games reach deeper in a world that is losing the language to articulate its own suffering. Empathy and compassion. With the rise of figures like Trump and Netanyahu who glorify cruelty, of Musk who deems empathy to be the fundamental weakness of Western civilization, our games can fight to inspire empathy, compassion, and solidarity. If empathy is resonance with suffering, compassion is the compulsion to do something about it. The game Elude shows us empathy because it represents not just what depression is, but what it feels like. Despair, constrained agency, arrow keys that refuse to work, the feeling of depression evoked without words. Citizen Sleeper's storytelling gives us empathy, but the game's mechanics allow us to show compassion. It allows us to help the characters. We have limited resources in this game world, but what is their worth if we can't use them to help those that we can? Modeling the human experience. Games have the capacity to evoke experiences we've never had through gameplay. Game designer Doris Roosh was going through a tough time herself when she created Elude. She made it to communicate the feeling of depression to friends and relatives who had not experienced it themselves, to fight stigma and promote support. The game first models happiness by giving the player power. They soar through a sunny sky, jumping between leaves and flowers, and then it drags the player down into darkness. No matter how much you press the keys, you can't get back up. You can't just try harder to break out of this place because the rules of the game don't permit it, and neither does the lived reality of depression. This is how Roosh translates real-life experiences into gameplay. She first deeply researches the experience she wants to model and identifies its rules and patterns. She prototypes with input from experts who've lived that experience and iterates based on their feedback. Finally, she tests with players unfamiliar with the experience, refining it until the emotion is clear to anyone. In this way, games can amplify the voices of those who are silenced and build empathy for marginalized experiences of suffering and oppression that are denied, ignored, or delegitimized under techno-fascist narratives. Anti-oppression. As it automates inequality, encodes bias into algorithms, and deepens division with big tech platforms, techno-fascism amplifies oppression. Anti-oppression in games refers to game design choices, mechanics, narratives, and rule sets that provide perspective taking. It's making games with the intention to reveal how oppression works, uphold marginalized experiences, and empower players to think critically about real-world injustice. It asks that we question who holds power in the game world and in turn examine our own internalized values, biases, and prejudices. Bury Me, My Love guides us through the journey of a Syrian refugee. In the game Through the Darkest of Times, players lead a small resistance group in Nazi Germany, making decisions to protect civilians, sabotage the regime, and navigate moral dilemmas under extreme surveillance and danger. Teaching resistance. Games are built to teach. Simply playing a game teaches us its systems, constraints, and possibilities. In this way, it's possible that gameplay can be used to demystify activism and motivate players to reflect on their own potential for resistance in the real world, something that's becoming progressively difficult as activism is increasingly punished and individualism increasingly glorified. We can see elements of this again in Through the Darkest of Times. Set in Berlin under Hitler's rule, it is a reminder to be vigilant against the slow creep of fascism and the atrocities wrought in its name, while also educating players about the Holocaust. You gather a small team of citizens and allocate them to various tasks based on their skill sets, recruiting supporters, gathering supplies, or spraying anti-government slogans on the city walls. With intention, it's possible we could use gameplay to teach real-world resistance. Cooperative play. Techno-fascism fuels competition, individualism, and division, but collectivity, togetherness, and community are often seen as prerequisites for social change. Multiplayer games, when done right, challenge individualism and foster cooperation. They're potential powerhouses for community and belonging. It's what sees free Hong Kong banners cropping up in Animal Crossing and kids protesting ICE in Roblox. It's possible we could better leverage the power of multiplayer games by helping players experience resistance through shared storytelling. Agency and choice. Agency means the ability to take meaningful action and to see the consequences of those actions. The Walking Dead offers the player great agency over Lee's choices. The effect is that we share in his agenda, his emotions, and his responsibility. We have no choice but to reflect on the actions we would take in his shoes. It's a threefold effect: empathy, compassion, action. In games, the sum of our choices give us an account of who we are and where we stand. As techno-fascists engineer their platforms to numb us and erode hope, agency in games is an urgent reminder that our choices have power. Engagement and immersion. Engagement is about keeping players playing, whereas immersion means the feeling of actually being present in the game world. We can achieve this by crafting games that are emotionally compelling and filled with sensory cues that make the game world feel real and consequential. As social media shortens our attention spans, engagement can help us keep players invested long enough to absorb a game's transformative message, while immersion can help them connect more deeply to it. Undertale's immersion saw us forge deep connections with its characters, who asked us to unlearn the practices of violence and conquest we've become numb to in video games. Its engagement had us doing replay after replay to save them. A real-world call to action. Even if games distract from or ease players into their message, an explicit call to action is often needed for that message to translate into reality. This War of Mine, for example, calls upon players to donate to the real-life charity War Child, which is an organization dedicated to helping children affected by war. Jane McGonigal also speaks to awe as a collective call to action. In the age of individualism, awe is the feeling that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. As Keltner says, it is about feeling reverential towards participating in some expansive process that unites us all. If we want to be a part of the multiple forms of resistance against techno-fascism, we need to design more games that inspire collaboration, empathy, and resistance. Games that can use their inherent transformative power to challenge techno-fascism's colonization of our lives. There is hope. We've witnessed the powerful protests for Palestine, the election of Zoran Mamdani, and in our own country, our president held firm against Trump when he tried to disrupt the G20 by boycotting it. And now global leaders are standing behind South Africa as Trump attempts to bar us from the G20 in 2026. So yes, resistance is possible in-game and in the real world, because art would not be censored and books would not be burned if we weren't dangerous. Thank you.